What was the scariest we need to leave, now gut feeling that you've ever experienced? Serious. Story 1. This happened when I was 14 and babysitting my neighbor's twin boys who were about 7. Their parents had gone out for their anniversary and left me in charge for the evening. The kids were being pretty good. We'd had dinner and were watching a movie when there was a knock at the front door around 8 p.m. I looked through the peephole and saw this guy I didn't recognize standing there. He looked maybe in his 42nd, wearing a baseball cap and a jacket. When I didn't answer, he knocked again, harder this time. Then he started talking through the door saying stuff like, "I know someone's home. I saw the lights on and I just need to use your phone. My car broke down." The twins came over asking who was at the door, and I quietly told them to go back to the living room and keep watching their movie. But this guy wouldn't leave. He kept knocking and saying he really needed help. Then he started walking around the house trying different windows. I could hear him testing the back door handle. That's when I grabbed the kids and we all went upstairs to the master bedroom with the phone. I locked the door and called 911, then called the kids' parents. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and that officers were on their way. I kept the kids calm by telling them it was just someone who was lost and needed directions, but inside I was totally freaking out. I could hear this guy still moving around the house, and at one point it sounded like he was trying to force open a window downstairs. The twins were getting scared because they could hear the noise too. I just kept whispering that help was coming and everything would be okay. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only about 15 minutes, I heard sirens and saw police car lights through the bedroom window. The guy must have heard them too because everything went quiet. When the officers came to the door, they said they found signs that someone had tried to break in through the kitchen window but couldn't find anyone in the area. The kids' parents came home immediately and were totally shaken up. They said they were so proud of how I handled it, but honestly I was just running on pure adrenaline and instinct. Looking back, I'm really glad I trusted my gut feeling that something wasn't right about that situation. Who knows what that guy's real intentions were, but I definitely didn't want to find out. Story 2. So this was back in college, and I work at this dive bar in a pretty small town. It was around 2:30 a.m. to what I thought was our smoke detector chirping because the battery was dying. You know that annoying beep it does? Except when I laid there listening, it wasn't really chirping regularly like a dying battery. It was more like muffled. Something felt really off about the whole thing. Our bedroom is upstairs and I started noticing this weird smell, kind of like when you blow out a candle but stronger. I shook my husband awake and told him something was wrong. He was groggy and annoyed, telling me to just change the smoke detector battery in the morning, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I got up and opened our bedroom door, and immediately the smell hit me way stronger. I started going downstairs and could see this orange flickering light coming from our kitchen area. The curtains by our back door were completely on fire. I screamed for my husband and kids to get out immediately. We all ran outside in our pajamas and called 911. The fire department said it started from a space heater we'd left plugged in near those curtains. If I hadn't woken up when I did, or if I'd just ignored that weird feeling and gone back to sleep, we probably wouldn't have made it out. The downstairs was pretty much destroyed, but we're all okay. I'll never ignore my gut when something feels wrong in the middle of the night. Story 3. When I was about 12, my little sister and I were playing in our front yard while my mom was inside making dinner. We lived on a pretty busy street but our yard was set back a bit behind some trees. I was teaching my sister how to do cartwheels when this white van pulls up and parks right in front of our house. Two guys get out and start walking toward us. One of them calls out, "Hey girls, we're looking for our lost puppy. Have you seen a little brown dog around here?" My sister, who was only 6, starts walking toward them because she loves animals. But something about these guys just felt off. They looked way too interested in us and kept glancing around like they were checking if anyone was watching. I grabbed my sister's arm and said, "We haven't seen any dog, sorry." But they kept getting closer, and the first guy goes, "Are you sure? Maybe you could help us look in our van, we have pictures." That's when every alarm bell in my head started going crazy. I picked up my sister and ran toward the house screaming, "Mom, Mom," at the top of my lungs. I heard them running back to their van and by the time my mom got to the front door, they were already speeding away. My mom called the cops immediately and they said there had been similar reports in our area that week. We weren't allowed to play in the front yard alone after that, but honestly I was too scared to want to anyway. The whole thing probably lasted less than 2 minutes, but it felt like forever. I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't trusted the gut feeling telling me to run. Story 4. So this was back in college, and my friends and I were at this dive bar off campus. It was one of those places that gets pretty rough later in the night, but we were young and stupid so we stayed way too late. Around 1 a.m., things started getting weird. There were these two groups of guys who kept staring each other down from across the room. You could feel the tension building, people were talking louder, getting more aggressive, and the bartender looked nervous as hell. One of my friends wanted to stay because he was talking to some girl, but I had this overwhelming feeling that we needed to get out before something bad happened. The energy in the room was just completely wrong. I kept looking at the exit and calculating how fast we could get there. I finally convinced everyone to leave, but as we were walking to the door, I heard this guy behind us say something about taking care of this outside. That was it for me. I grabbed my buddies and we basically ran to our car. We were maybe 2 blocks away when we heard sirens heading back toward the bar. Found out the next day that a massive fight broke out right after we left. Apparently it started with those 2 groups I'd noticed, but then half the bar got involved. Several people ended up in the hospital and the police arrested like 8 guys. The crazy part is that if we'd left just 5 minutes later, we probably would have gotten caught up in it. Sometimes your gut just knows when a situation is about to go completely sideways, and you have to trust that feeling even when your friends think you're being paranoid. Story 5. This happened about 3 years ago when I was visiting my parents' house for Thanksgiving. We live in Tornado Alley, and my dad has always been super paranoid about weather, like, obsessively checking radar apps and having weather alerts on his phone. Anyway, we're all sitting around after dinner, probably around 8 p.m., just watching television and relaxing. It was one of those unseasonably warm November days, really humid and still. My dad keeps getting up and looking out the window, and my mom's rolling her eyes like here he goes again with the weather thing. But then I started feeling it too. The air just felt wrong somehow, too quiet, too heavy. Even our dog was acting weird, pacing around and whining. Dad suddenly stands up and says everyone needs to get downstairs right now. We all start arguing with him because there weren't even any tornado warnings, but he's already grabbing the emergency radio and flashlights. Thank God we listened. We'd barely made it to the basement when we heard this incredible roaring sound, like a freight train going right over our house. A tornado touched down less than half a mile away and took out our neighbor's barn and about 6 massive oak trees. The power lines came down right across our driveway. If we'd still been upstairs watching television when those trees fell, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. Dad just knew somehow, and I've never questioned his weather instincts since. Story 6. So I work at a small coffee shop and we have this regular who always came in right before closing. Nice enough guy, but something about him always felt off. He'd order a simple coffee and then just sit there for like an hour watching everyone, especially me and my coworker Isabella. Last month Isabella had already left for the day and I was cleaning up alone when this guy comes in maybe 10 minutes before we close. Orders as usual but then starts asking me personal stuff about my family and where I live. I'm trying to be polite but professional, you know? Just small talk to get through until I can lock up. But then he asks if I need help carrying stuff to my car, and offers to wait while I finish closing. That's when my gut just dropped. Something about the way he said it, like he'd been thinking about this for a while. I told him we were actually closed and he needed to leave, but he just sat there sipping his coffee super slowly. I ended up calling my boyfriend to come pick me up, and told the customer that my ride was here. He finally left, but I watched him walk to the parking lot and just sit in his car for another 20 minutes. My boyfriend had to escort me to my car and follow me home. We installed better locks at the shop and now nobody closes alone anymore. The guy hasn't been back since, but it really shook me up. Sometimes you just know when someone's intentions aren't good, even if they haven't actually done anything yet. Story 7. This is probably the most terrifying experience of my life, and I still get chills thinking about it. I was 22 and had just moved to this new city for my first real job after college. I was working late shifts at a restaurant, usually getting off around 11 p.m. or midnight. One night in October, I'm driving home on this route I'd taken probably 50 times before. It goes through this residential area with lots of trees and not great street lighting. I'm about halfway home when I notice there's a car behind me. Not unusual, right? But after a few turns, it's still there. I start paying more attention and realize this car has been following me for like 10 minutes now. Every turn I make, every stop sign, this car makes the exact same moves about 3 car lengths behind me. My heart starts pounding and I'm trying to convince myself I'm being paranoid. So I decide to test it. I take a completely random right turn down this street I've never been on before. It's basically a dead end that loops back around. Sure enough, the car follows. That's when I knew for sure I was being followed, and this wave of pure terror just hits me. I'm a woman driving alone at night, and I have no idea what this person wants. I remember my dad always telling me never to drive home if someone's following you, so I start driving toward the police station downtown. The car is still behind me, and I'm honestly freaking out at this point. I'm driving probably 50 miles per hour in a 35 zone, running yellow lights, anything to get to safety faster. When I get about 2 blocks from the police station, I see the car behind me suddenly take a sharp right and speed off down a side street. I pulled into the police parking lot anyway and sat there for probably 20 minutes, just shaking. The officer I talked to said I did exactly the right thing and that there had been reports of someone following women drivers in that area for the past month. I never found out who it was or what they wanted, but I moved apartments the next month and changed my route home. That gut feeling probably saved my life. Story 8. When I was 17, I got invited to what was supposed to be a small house party at this guy Jake's place. I didn't know Jake super well, but my friend Mia was dating his roommate, so she vouched for him. The party was supposed to start at 8, but Mia had to work late, so I went alone, planning to meet her there later. Soon as I walked in, something felt completely off. There were way more people than expected, mostly older guys I'd never seen before. The music was cranked up really loud and there was this heavy, weird atmosphere. Like everyone was on edge or something. Jake came up to me immediately and offered me a drink that was already mixed, which seemed strange. I asked where Mia was and he got this annoyed look and said she wasn't coming anymore. Red flag number 1. Then I noticed there were barely any other girls there, maybe 3 or 4 total in a house full of like 20 guys. Red flag number 2. The guys kept trying to get me to drink this specific mixed drink, and when I asked for just a beer instead, they acted weird about it. One guy actually grabbed my arm when I tried to move away from him. That's when every alarm bell in my head started screaming. I told Jake I had to step outside to call my mom, then literally just kept walking to my car. As I'm leaving, I hear one of them yell, "Where's she going?" and a couple guys started following me out. I drove straight home and called Mia. Turns out Jake had lied. She was never planning to come because she'd heard sketchy things about him from other people. She'd been trying to text me to warn me not to go, but my phone had died. Found out later from someone at school that Jake and his friends had been accused of some really messed up stuff at their parties before. Nothing was ever proven, but enough girls had bad experiences that people started warning each other to stay away. Story 9. I was camping with my girlfriend up in the mountains last summer, doing this backcountry hiking trip. We'd been out there for 3 days and were having an amazing time. Perfect weather, incredible views, just the two of us in nature. On our last night, we set up camp near this little creek, probably about 2 miles from the nearest trail. We're sitting by our campfire after dinner, just talking and enjoying the stars, when I start noticing how quiet it's gotten. Like, dead silent. No birds, no insects, even the creek seemed quieter. At first I didn't think much of it, but then my girlfriend points out that our food bags are swaying even though there's no wind. That's when I noticed this smell, kind of musky and wild, but not like anything I'd smelled before. Then we hear this huffing sound coming from the trees behind our tent. Not like a dog or anything familiar, something much bigger and deeper. My girlfriend grabs my arm and we both just freeze. The huffing gets closer, maybe 30 feet away now, and I hear these heavy footsteps in the underbrush. I don't know what came over me, but I suddenly know we need to get out of there immediately. I grab our headlamps and tell her we're hiking back to the car. She thinks I'm crazy because it's almost 10 p.m. and we'd have to hike 2 miles in the dark, but I'm already packing up our stuff as fast as I can. We never saw what was making those sounds, but about a mile down the trail we run into another group of campers who tell us they'd just seen a huge black bear with cubs heading in the direction of our campsite. The ranger we reported to later said we were smart to leave. Mother bears with cubs are incredibly dangerous, especially at night. Sometimes, you just have to trust that primal fear response. Story 10. I was at this sketchy 24-hour convenience store around 2 a.m. getting snacks for a road trip. The place was in a rough part of town, but it was the only thing open. When I walked in, there were 2 guys near the back acting really weird. One kept looking toward the front door while the other was whispering something urgently. The cashier, this older guy, looked absolutely terrified. Like sweating, hands shaking, kept glancing at these 2 dudes. That's when I noticed one of the guys had his hand in his jacket pocket in a really unnatural way, like he was gripping something. My brain just screamed, "Get out now." I grabbed the first thing I could reach, some gum, paid as fast as possible, and basically speed walked to my car. As I'm pulling out of the parking lot, I see the guy with his hand in his pocket walking toward the counter. I drove about 2 blocks away and called the police, told them what I saw and gave them the address. Found out the next day that the place got robbed about 10 minutes after I left. The cashier got hurt, but thankfully not seriously. Sometimes you just know when something bad is about to go down. I'm just grateful I listened to that voice in my head telling me to get out of there. Story 11. My dad had always been the type to handle stress by withdrawing, so when he started spending more time alone in his workshop, we didn't think much of it at first. He'd been having some work troubles and my parents had been arguing more than usual. But there was something about the way he'd been acting that last week that felt off. He stopped complaining about things that usually bothered him. He wasn't getting frustrated with traffic or annoyed when the neighbors were loud. My mom thought he was finally learning to relax, but it made me nervous. Dad was always a worrier, so seeing him suddenly so calm was actually more unsettling than comforting. On Thursday night, I had this overwhelming urge to go talk to him. I found him in the workshop, just sitting there staring at nothing. When I asked if he was okay, he said everything was going to be fine now. The way he said it gave me chills. I convinced him to come inside for some coffee and ended up staying up talking with him until dawn. During our conversation, He finally opened up about how hopeless he'd been feeling. He admitted he'd been planning to end things that night, but said talking to me reminded him he had reasons to keep fighting. We got him connected with a therapist the next day, and he's been doing so much better since. Story 12. I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to what I thought was our smoke detector chirping because the battery was dying. You know that annoying beep it does? Except when I laid there listening, it wasn't really chirping regularly like a dying battery. It was more like muffled. Something felt really off about the whole thing. Our bedroom is upstairs and I started noticing this weird smell, kind of like when you blow out a candle but stronger. I shook my husband awake and told him something was wrong. He was groggy and annoyed, telling me to just change the smoke detector battery in the morning, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I got up and opened our bedroom door, and immediately the smell hit me way stronger. I started going downstairs and could see this orange flickering light coming from our kitchen area. The curtains by our back door were completely on fire. I screamed for my husband and kids to get out immediately. We all ran outside in our pajamas and called 911. The fire department said it started from a space heater we'd left plugged in near those curtains. If I hadn't woken up when I did, or if I'd just ignored that weird feeling and gone back to sleep, we probably wouldn't have made it out. The downstairs was pretty much destroyed, but we're all okay. I'll never ignore my gut when something feels wrong in the middle of the night. Story 13. I work in this office building downtown with a parking garage underneath. Usually I don't think twice about walking to my car, but this one evening something felt really wrong the moment I stepped off the elevator. The garage was way too quiet, even for 7 p.m. Usually there are at least a few people heading to their cars, but it was completely empty. As I'm walking toward my car, I hear footsteps echoing behind me. I slow down, they slow down. I speed up, they speed up. I'm trying not to panic, but my hands are shaking as I'm digging through my purse for my keys. The footsteps are getting closer and I can hear heavy breathing. I finally find my keys and I'm about to unlock my car when I hear this voice right behind me saying, "Excuse me, miss." I don't even turn around. Something in my gut is screaming at me not to engage with this person. Instead, I duck down behind my car and army crawl under the vehicle next to mine. I know it sounds crazy, but I was absolutely terrified. From under the car, I can see his legs walking around my car, and he's calling out, "Hello? I just wanted to ask you something." But his voice didn't sound friendly at all. It sounded angry and frustrated. I stayed under that car for what felt like forever until I heard the elevator ding and his footsteps heading toward it. I waited another 10 minutes before I got up and ran to my car. I was shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. Security cameras later showed the guy had been following me from the lobby. Never found out who he was or what he wanted, but I always park on a different level now. Story 14. I was taking the subway home from college, and it was pretty late, maybe around 9 p.m. The train wasn't super crowded, but there were enough people that I didn't feel unsafe or anything. I was sitting near the back with my headphones in, just minding my own business. At one of the stops, most people got off and this guy got on. He could have sat literally anywhere on the train, but he chose the seat directly across from me. That was weird, but not weird enough to worry about yet. But then at the next stop, I moved to a completely different section of the train car. Guess who followed me? Yep, same guy. He sat down right across from me again, and this time he was staring directly at me. Not even trying to be subtle about it. I'm starting to get really uncomfortable at this point. I take my headphones out because I want to be aware of what's going on around me. The guy is still staring, and now he's smiling this creepy smile. I look around the train car and realize there are only like 4 other people left, and they're all the way at the front. When the train pulled into the next station, I made a split-second decision. I pretended I was staying on, but right as the doors were about to close, I jumped off. I thought I was being smart, but then I see the guy jump off too, right behind me. Now I'm on this empty platform at night with this creep following me. I could see him about 20 feet behind me as I'm walking toward the exit. My heart was beating so fast I thought I might pass out. Thankfully there was a security guard at the top of the stairs. I walked straight up to him and told him what was happening. The guard took one look behind me and started walking toward the guy. The creep immediately turned around and went back down to catch another train. The security guard walked me outside and waited with me until my dad could come pick me up. I never took that train line again, especially not at night. Still gives me the chills thinking about what might have happened if there hadn't been a security guard there. Story 15. My mom has always been super intuitive, but this one time really freaked me out. I was 16 and had been feeling pretty sick for a couple days, just tired and nauseous, figured it was the flu going around school. Mom kept asking if I felt okay and I kept saying yeah, just need to rest. Well, one morning I woke up feeling a bit better actually, was planning to go to school. Mom comes into my room and just stands there staring at me for like 30 seconds. Then she goes, "Get dressed, we're going to the hospital right now." I was like, "Mom, I feel fine, "You're being paranoid," but she wouldn't hear it. She literally threw clothes at me and said we were leaving immediately. The whole drive there she kept saying she just had this overwhelming feeling that something was really wrong with me. Turns out my appendix was about to burst. The doctor said if we'd waited even another hour or two, I could have died from it rupture. The crazy part is I had zero of the classic symptoms, no pain in the right side, no fever, nothing. Even the emergency room staff was skeptical until they did the scans. Mom just looked at me and said I knew something wasn't right, I could feel it. The doctor told us that maternal instinct probably saved my life that day. Now whenever Mom gets one of her feelings about something, we all listen. That woman's gut instincts are seriously no joke. Story 16. We were on this camping trip in the mountains when I was about 12. It was supposed to be this fun weekend getaway, just me, my parents, and my younger brother. We'd found this perfect spot by a stream, kind of secluded but not too far from the main trail. On our second day, we were sitting around the campfire when this man appeared out of nowhere. He seemed friendly enough at first, asking about our hike and complimenting our setup, but something about him just felt off. He was asking way too many questions about where we were from, how long we were staying, if we'd seen any other campers around. What really creeped me out was how he kept looking at me and my brother. Not like a normal adult would look at kids, but this intense stare that made my skin crawl. My dad must have noticed too because he started giving short answers and moving closer to us. The guy hung around for maybe 20 minutes, and the whole time I had this horrible feeling in my stomach. Then he starts asking if he can share our campfire since his went out and he forgot his lighter. But I hadn't seen any other campsite nearby, and he didn't have any camping gear with him at all. That's when my mom stood up and said we were actually just about to pack up and head home. The guy's whole demeanor changed instantly. He got this look on his face like he was angry we were leaving. He didn't say goodbye or anything, just turned around and walked back into the woods. We packed up our stuff so fast and got out of there. On the drive home, my dad told us he'd noticed the guy had been watching our campsite from the trees for a while before he came over. We never went back to that spot again. Story 17. I was 16 and had just gotten my license, so I was always looking for excuses to drive somewhere. My friend Sarah needed a ride to pick up her paycheck from the restaurant where she worked, which was in this strip mall about 20 minutes from our town. It wasn't a great area, but it was still daytime and I figured we'd be fine. When we got there, Sarah ran into the restaurant while I waited in the car with the engine running. That's when I noticed this group of guys hanging around near the dumpsters behind the stores. There were maybe 4 or 5 of them, and they kept looking over at my car and talking among themselves. At first I didn't think much of it, but then one of them started walking toward my car. He was probably in his 22nd, kind of sketchy looking, and he had his hands in his pockets. When he got closer, he knocked on my passenger window and motioned for me to roll it down. I shook my head and pointed toward the restaurant, trying to indicate I was waiting for someone, but he didn't back off. Instead, he walked around to the driver's side and knocked on that window. Now his friends were walking over too, and I was starting to panic. This guy was saying something I couldn't hear through the glass, and he was trying the door handle. Thank goodness I had locked the doors. I honked the horn hoping Sarah would hear it and come out, but she didn't appear. The guys were now surrounding my car, and one of them was standing right in front of it so I couldn't drive forward. My hands were shaking as I put the car in reverse, but there was another car parked right behind me. That's when I just laid on the horn nonstop and started yelling. Finally Sarah came running out of the restaurant, and when the guys saw her, they just walked away like nothing happened. I was so rattled I could barely drive home. Sarah felt terrible and said her manager told her there had been some incidents in that parking lot recently. I never went back to that strip mall, and I definitely learned to trust my instincts about sketchy situations. Story 18. 2 years ago I was job hunting after graduation and got contacted about this marketing position at a company I'd never heard of. The guy who called said he'd gotten my resume from the career center and wanted to interview me that day if possible. Usually interviews are scheduled way in advance, so that was my first red flag, but I was desperate for work. He gave me an address and said to come around 6 p.m. When I got there, it was this run-down office building in a pretty sketchy part of town. Most of the building looked empty except for a few lights on the second floor. The front door was propped open and there was no security desk or anything. I found the suite number he gave me, but there was no company name on the door. Just a number. I knocked and this guy opens it, not dressed professionally at all, just jeans and a t-shirt. The office was basically an empty room with a folding table and 2 chairs. He starts asking me these weird questions that had nothing to do with marketing, like if I lived alone, if my family knew where I was, stuff like that. Then he says the position involves traveling to meet clients and staying in hotels, sometimes for weeks at a time. That's when every warning signal in my brain started going off. This was not a legitimate job interview. I stood up and said I needed to use the restroom, then just walked straight out of the building. As I'm getting to my car, I see him come outside and he's talking on his phone, looking around the parking lot. I drove out of there so fast and went straight to the police station to report it. The officer I talked to said they'd had similar reports about fake job interviews being used to target young women. They investigated but couldn't find any record of the company or the guy. The building owner said that suite was supposed to be vacant. Still makes me sick thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't trusted the gut feeling and left when I did. Story 19. I was 11 years old and spending the summer at my grandparents' house out in the country. They had this huge property with woods and a creek, and I loved exploring by myself. My grandpa had shown me all the safe trails and told me which areas to avoid, so my grandparents were pretty relaxed about letting me wander around during the day. One afternoon I was following this path I'd never taken before, deeper into the woods than I usually went. It was really quiet back there, just the sound of birds and leaves rustling. I'd been walking for maybe 20 minutes when I came to this clearing where there was an old, run-down cabin that looked like it hadn't been used in years. I was curious, so I walked up to look through the windows. Most of them were too dirty to see through, but I could make out some old furniture inside covered in dust. I was just about to head back when I heard a car door slam somewhere nearby. That was weird because I was pretty deep in the woods and hadn't seen any roads. I ducked behind a tree and stayed really still, listening. Then I heard men's voices getting closer, talking in low voices like they didn't want to be overheard. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but something about the whole situation felt really wrong. Why would people be meeting out here in the middle of nowhere? My heart started pounding and I knew I needed to get out of there immediately. I waited until the voices seemed to move toward the cabin, then I quietly started making my way back down the path. But I was trying to be so quiet that I was moving really slowly, and I kept hearing branches breaking behind me like someone might be following. I finally just started running as fast as I could through the woods, not caring about the noise I was making. I didn't stop until I could see my grandparents' house through the trees. When I got back, I was all scratched up from running through brush and completely out of breath. My grandma took one look at me and knew something was wrong. I told them what happened, and my grandpa's face got really serious. He said that area was private property and I should never go back there alone. Later I overheard him on the phone with someone, talking about checking on that old place and mentioning the sheriff's department. To this day I don't know what those men were doing out there, but my gut was screaming at me to run and I'm really glad I listened to it. That feeling of being watched still gives me chills when I think about it. Story 20. My little sister was always a deep sleeper, like nothing could wake this kid up. When she was about 8, she started having these weird episodes where she'd wake up in the middle of the night saying she couldn't breathe properly. Our parents figured it was just bad dreams or maybe anxiety from starting at a new school. One night around 2 a.m., I woke up with this intense feeling that something was seriously wrong with her. Not just check on your sister, but more like get up right now or something terrible will happen. I've never felt anything that urgent before in my life. I ran to her room and found her sitting on the edge of her bed, gasping for air and turning blue around the lips. She couldn't even speak, just kept pointing at her throat. Our parents were completely out cold, Dad even sleeps through thunderstorm. I grabbed her and ran downstairs, yelling for Mom and Dad to wake up and call 911. By the time the paramedics got there, her breathing had gotten even worse. They said her throat was swelling shut from some kind of allergic reaction, probably to the new laundry detergent Mom had started using on her sheets. They got her to the hospital just in time. Doctor said if we'd waited another 10 or 15 minutes, she could have suffocated. My parents kept asking how I knew to check on her, and honestly I still can't explain it. Just this overwhelming feeling that I needed to get to her room immediately.